All right. So you made it to the end of week 4, the end of the HTML and CSS module. So kudos to you guys. Of course, HTML and CSS does not obviously completely go away at this point, but we stop focusing solely on that and start getting into some JavaScript fun next week. We will dive into the basics of computer science. JavaScript is definitely the module that the students say is the hardest, but at the same time, it is definitely the basis of everything that we build from here on out. So that's what you have to look forward to. Tonight is definitely a little different than the rest of the evenings. We will not be actually coding anything tonight. Short of open hack on Tuesday and subsequent second Tuesdays of the month. I should say don't get used to not coding. That is definitely not something that we do on a regular basis, but this is an opportunity to get to know me a little bit better. Um, and so the reason that I do this is I think it's really important that you know who you're learning from. Because there's definitely a rapport that we build over the next couple months. And so I like to kind of get things going. I like to get you going in code, get you going in building things, and then give a little background on who I am, because there's nothing more boring to me, especially in week 1, than introducing myself and giving the spiel that you hear about all of your instructors. So with all of that said, are there any questions right off the bat before I give a quick couple minute background on myself?
Oh, I got a question. So for I see like the homework assignment for the intro blog.
Yep.
Uh do I need to like do like the headshots, or are y'all gonna give us like our headshots? I can put it in there, or
Yeah, so Karen should have emailed you the headshots. Did anyone get an email from Karen about the headshots? I thought she sent those yesterday.
No, I haven't seen anything. I mean, I can check my Gmail right now because
Okay.
sometimes there's a lot of stuff in there.
Let me send a link then. I did talk to her yesterday and she uploaded all the headshots and said she was going to email you guys. Let me grab that link and share it with you in the chat. Give me 1 second. Okay, I just pasted that link in the chat. You guys will have to go through all of the different images there because it's basically one big folder. But I believe she uploaded all of the photos there, so that should give you access to them. Any other questions? Okay, so let me give a kind of quick rundown on my background. I think there are 3 really important introductions that you're comfortable kind of giving to about yourself to other people. There's what we call your quick intro, right? Which is you meet someone for the first time, usually in a professional setting, and it's really important to be able to say who you are in one sentence, right? So, my very quick intro, even shorter than the elevator pitch, is hi, my name is Max Matthews. I'm a full stack JavaScript developer. I work for a startup, and I'm also lead instructor at a local boot camp in Syracuse, New York. Short, simple, sweet, a sentence or two, but you kind of get a very quick intro of who I am. Of course, all of you already know that, But that is really important because when you meet someone for the first time and they go, hey, my name is blah, 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 I do this, what do you do? Sometimes you can get caught off guard by not having a short and sweet intro about yourself. Next up is what they call the elevator pitch. And the elevator pitch is, hey, I run into someone in an elevator, and that elevator is going to go up a certain number of floors, and I'm only going to have 60 seconds to introduce myself. So some networking opportunities or some networking courses will say that you should have a timed 30 or 60-second introduction. But it's more important that you have something a little bit more rehearsed, right? Something that you can definitely introduce yourself, go a little bit more in depth, leave them intrigued, but at the same time, it's not something that you're going to go on a life story of your background. When I was young, my father left my family, or, anything as dramatic as that, but something that is a little bit more in depth, something that is going to leave that person wanting more. And so for me, I would say, hey, my name is Max Matthews. Initially, I'm from South Jersey. I moved to Syracuse to attend Syracuse University for college. Afterwards, I was offered a job opportunity at a local startup. I've been working with them since, almost for about 10 years now. I've had the opportunity at that job to grow from a true entry-level developer all the way up into a senior developer, where I've had the opportunity to grow 2 teams underneath me. I have found that in my full stack web development passion, while I've been working for that startup, I've had the opportunity to also teach, and that has been really rewarding. I have now taught 5 or 6 different cohorts at a boot camp that is for serving underdeveloped or underrepresented people in the Syracuse, New York area. We do also teach full stack web development at that boot camp, and that has been really rewarding because I've been able to grow my professional career while at the same time helping develop talent in the Syracuse, New York area based off of that. Quick 30 to 60-second introduction, succinct, to the point, gets that across. And then from there, you can really develop there. I will say, yes, Karen's images are definitely the raw images. Karen, I believe, will also be at OpenHack on Tuesday. So you can ask her any questions you have about the images at that point. Okay, little more background on me. So I grew up in South Jersey, grew up in a small beach town that was absolutely dead in the winter. And we only had 3 or 4 months of activity going on there. I didn't know what quite I wanted to do, but I knew it was related to technology. I knew I wanted to get out of Ocean City just because I knew I wasn't interested in tourism or running a family business. So I attended the iSchool at SU. I thought that IT was what I wanted to get into. I did take a computer science course, AP Computer Science, in high school, and that was my first real introduction to computer science. So I learned Java. I learned the basic computer science principles there with loops and variables and the basics of computer science. Went to college for that. Not actually computer science. I went to college for information sciences, right? Which is the broader field of ordering hardware, keeping track of it, website design. Not quite traditional computer science, but the broader field of how does technology apply to business? How does technology apply to our world? I ended up doing 3 years there and stopped a little short of getting my college degree, because all throughout college, I was focused more on seeing all of these different opportunities for apps. So the first app that I worked on, I was living at a dorm at SU, and I thought it was absolutely ridiculous that every package that came into the dorm was logged on an 11 by 17 piece of paper, right? And they would write down the recipient's name, and then they would handwrite the entire tracking number down. And then they would put a piece of paper in your mailbox, and you would take that paper, pick it up, sign for it, and that's how you would get your package. And I thought, all right, this is the early mid 2010s. I think that this is ridiculous. When a package comes in, they should be able to scan the tracking number on an iPod Touch or an iPhone or whatever it is, have it detect the tracking number, have it pick up the mailbox number, and send an email or a text message. Hey, by the way, you've got a package that's ready for pickup. And then when you come down there, you should be able to type in your mailbox number, sign for it with your finger, get the package that way. And so I actually started talking to the person who was running the dorm at the time, and they were like, "Yeah, this is a huge waste of time. We pay people minimum wage to sit at the desk and manually write in like a 20-digit tracking number, and we get so many packages now that it's just really inefficient." And so at the time, I thought, "All right, well, I want to build an app for that, and I know a programming language. How hard can it be to build a mobile app?" And so I started down that path, and I realized that, hey, if I know Java, Java isn't enough to build an app. Java is actually the programming language they used at the time to build a mobile app for Android, but not for iOS. And iOS was kind of where I wanted to specialize. And so I started doing some research there, and I found out that I could make what they call a cross-platform app um, if I learned JavaScript, or I could build that native app using what they used at the time, which was Objective-C. They now use a programming language called Swift, much better language. But anyway, so I went out and I learned Objective-C at the time. And so I got through all of that. I started playing around. I built a little app that could scan the code, the tracking number. I'm feeling really good about that. And then I'm like, all right, well, now what do I do with this information? I need to save all of this information in a database. So I went out, I started Googling, I started reading all these articles, I started comparing different things, and it turned out that SQL was a entirely separate language, query language, that I had to learn in order to save information into a database. So I took a community college course on SQL. I started going down that path. I started feeling really good about that. And I'm like, great, I know a programming language for creating apps, for mobile apps. I know a programming language for interacting with databases. I'm good to go. I'm finally going to be able to build this thing, right? Wrong. Turns out that you can't write SQL code directly in your mobile apps. Instead, you have to learn a server-side programming language that is going to be the middle layer between your mobile app and your database apps. So I'm like, great, I need to go out and learn one of those. So I did a little research. I tried a couple different ones, didn't know anything about frameworks, didn't have anyone professionally guiding me. I didn't have anyone saying, hey, you're becoming a full stack developer. All I had was my end goal in mind, right? And my end goal was, I got to build this app. I think it's going to be really cool if I can build an app that is going to solve a problem that I interact with on a regular basis. And so that's what I did. I went out, I saw all these different server-side programming languages out there. I settled on PHP. PHP is a one of the first server-side programming languages that came out. PHP is the language that powers WordPress and therefore a large majority of the internet. I came up with that, learned PHP, and finally I was able to actually make that app. And so not only did I make that app while I was in college, I also made two other apps. I thought it was also ridiculous that we were passing around a piece of paper for checking in for attendance. And so I made an app that would allow you to swipe in the ID that you were given for college, for getting into buildings, all of that kind of stuff. And so I built a little hardware swiper based off of a Raspberry Pi and a card swiper. I built the API and the website for tracking attendance, and then turned around and tried to sell that to a couple of my professors. And the professors actually, a couple of them actually bought them because they were like, this is so much easier for me than going through 200 people sitting in a lecture hall. I can just import all of my students, have them swipe in with their college IDs, track attendance that way. And then the final app that I built, I worked at the student center, and they were kind of interesting. They didn't work off of traditional shifts. They tried to bring in their staff based off of what events were happening in the building. And so that was really interesting, being able to gather those requirements, being able to work with time in programming, which is a little bit more challenging than you may think. And was able to build an entire app for them based off of login and authentication and all of that stuff. So, why do I tell you all of that? Because that is where my career really started. I wasn't in a vacuum. I wasn't learning these things just based off of projects that were assigned to me. In fact, I would say a good 75% of what I learned was not because a professor said, hey, you need to learn this language or this skill or build this project. It was because I went out with real world demands, right? And said, hey, I think that this app is going to help people. I think this app is going to solve problems that I actually have. And because of that, that's how I figured out what skills I needed to learn, what programming languages, all of that kind of stuff. So that is what landed me my first job. My boss, who I still work with to this day, was had a startup based in Syracuse. I got networked down at the Tech Garden, which is currently under construction, but the Tech Garden is run by Center State CEO. Is designed to help startups get off the ground. He was connected through that community. I sat down, interviewed with him, and he said, well, if you can build all of those apps, chances are that you can help me with the app that I am trying to build. And so I started working with him. I've been there now for 8 years, I believe. And what we have built together is a content management system for conversational content. So if you think about all of these chatbots that you interact with, a lot of them are AI driven now, but AI can kind of go askew, right? We've already seen where AI can confidently give you an answer, and then turns out that that answer is a little bit wrong. And so we build a content management system for conversational content that can be over text message, that can be over a smart home speaker like Alexa or Google Home, that can be a website that is powering, that can be an email that it generates, all different kinds of communication platforms that we can generate or target. But what we focus on is the healthcare industry and building that conversational content that basically won't go off the rails. We know exactly what it's going to say because we have built a platform that allows us to load that content in. So, long story short, you need to always have 3 intros for yourself prepared. The 2-sentence summary, the hey, I can do this in 30 seconds or probably 15 seconds. You need to have your 30 to 60-second intro prepared because people are genuinely curious about who you are. And then you also need to have a little bit of a backstory, right? How have you gotten to where you are? So, with all of that said, hopefully you have had a taste of all 3 of those. I am now going to open the floor to what we call the AMA, which is Ask Me Anything. It's Reddit inspired. to open the floor to any questions that you may have had about me, about the program, about your experience so far into programming, about where you may be headed. This is really a opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. Asma.
Yeah, just the only thing I was wondering about is, do they still use the apps you created for them over at SU?
Yeah, so up until last year, they were still using the Shifts app that I had built for them for signing up for shifts. That was the first app that I built that was basically used in production. They had about 100 employees using it. And up until last year, they still were. And it got to the point where I was like, I can't maintain this anymore. It's built in a very old version of PHP. And because it was the first app that I was building, it got to the point where it wasn't maintainable anymore. So I would have to basically go back in and refactor it. And so they basically said, look, we're broke. We can't pay for a custom application. We'll find $500 a year in our budget, and that's what we'll pay for it. And so what I learned throughout that application was not only, hey, when you're learning, you're going to make decisions that aren't going to be the most maintainable in terms of code quality, but also they were the only ones using that application. So for $500 a year, I'm like, is it really worth it to go back and rebuild this entire application when it was custom built based off of those requirements? So when you're building an application, you do want to get to that point where you go, all right, do I want to make this a business opportunity and try and sell this to other people, which was always the goal. But I also realized, hey, there's only so much one person can do here, right? And as a college student, I didn't have the time to focus on my education, to work at the student center, which was paying the bills, to build this application and then to turn around and go ahead and sell it. So I've got no regrets building it, but they don't use that particular application anymore. And then the same fate was kind of suffered by the tracking application for packages. Excuse me. And also the attendance application. I was like, hey, I learned a lot building those because I had that end goal in mind. I knew what I needed to learn. But I don't want to be the business person. I don't want to try and go out and sell this to colleges. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a tech guy, right? I want to focus on development. And so neither of those applications are being used anymore. But for the first application I had built for production use, I count 8 years as a pretty good run for them using it.
Okay, and just to follow up, I know you touched on the sales part, that you were not really you were looking to be a salesman, but how are you able to successfully pitch to, especially professors, during your tenure at SU?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of it was figuring out pricing. So it turns out that professors have a budget for every course that they teach, where they basically don't need to get approval to spend over that amount. And so when you sell to a college, you have to understand that there's a really long contracting phase. And in that contracting phase, this is true in healthcare and a couple other industries, but basically if it goes over a certain amount, that professor says, hey, I'm not allowed to spend that amount of money, but I can get you in touch with someone who is, right? Whether that's the dean of the college, whether that's a purchasing department, whatever it is. And this is true in a lot of areas of business where they say, hey, I'm allowed to spend a certain amount every month or quarter or year, but if it's greater than that amount, I now need to get approval for it. When you get that approval, that opens a whole nother door for security requirements, for contract review from attorneys, from any insurance requirements, which is a big thing in industry. And now all of a sudden that process turns into an entire can of worms. So oftentimes you can ask that right up front. You can say, hey, I'm interested in building this app or this website for you. What's your budget? And is there a budget number that we can hit that will get this process going faster? Because sometimes you may not be able to approve the entire budget, but you may be able to say, hey, I can spend X amount to just get this ball rolling. And once we get that ball rolling, once we get some smaller deliverable done, then we can grow it into a much bigger project. And so for the attendance system, that number was only a couple $100. But for me, I'm like, this is great. This is proving that someone is willing to spend money on it. That couple $100 isn't going to cover my time, but that couple $100 is every professor on campus has the ability to spend that money. So if I can get this developed for one professor, I can actually scale this out, get multiple professors using it, and still fly under the radar of having the entire college have to approve it in terms of security and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's really what made that project take off, and what really got it into production was that I didn't need to go through the IT department and contracting and all of that stuff. That was not true for the Shift application. So for the Shift application, it took about 1.5 years to get through all of the contracting requirements, which meant that I had built the entire application from scratch before I was actually approved to go ahead and use it. And so when you start selling applications, that is a great thing to keep in mind of what does the sales process look like? And even if you're going to turn around and graduate and go, you know what, I don't want to do this entrepreneurially, I want to go work for a company, you can also ask that for their interview process, because some companies will have 2 or 3 people that you talk to and they go, hey, I want to give you the job, here you go, when can you start? And other companies will have a 2 to 3 month interview process, right? Where you got to meet with different departments. You're going to have what they call the social or behavioral interview. You'll have a technical interview. You may meet with someone like HR, you may meet with a recruiter. There may be multiple steps to the process where it's not that they're not excited about hiring you, it's that they've got a really long pipeline. They've got a really long process that you've got to get through. And so before you get off your first interview, if they don't document that, if they don't tell you about that, whether it's in the job description or on that first call, that would probably be the first thing that I ask in an interview is, what's your process look like, right? Because I may get disheartened a month into this of, oh man, you don't want to hire me. And they may turn around and say, no, this isn't really anything wrong with you. We are really excited about you applying. It's just that we have 20 other people applying as well. And so we go in phases. We get everyone through that first interview phase, and you may be in the early half of that, right? You may be the first or second person they interview, and it just takes time for them to interview all 20 people in that phase before they get to the next. Hopefully that answers your question. Harley, question.
I think Mo had a question before I did.
Mo, do you still have your question, or are you regretting me answering too in depth?
No, you're fine. I had to get my son together. Toddlers are crazy. But I wanted to ask, because you mentioned this, I think the first or second day of class about Fortran. And they that's what they call air traffic control law, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
I know IBM still uses that sometimes for certain machines. And I know a lot of people who knew that language either got like pushed out or retired, or the case may be. I just wanted to ask a question about like, I don't know if you know about government contracts or like trying to contract, but like how would that process work if I learned that or talk? I've been looking at documentation on learning it myself and like figuring out how to contract myself or something like that. That seems like a very viable way to secure employment for myself.
Yeah. Fortran and another one is COBOL. COBOL is used for a lot of older applications, what we call legacy applications. And then the third and final one I can recommend is IBM has one for mainframes as well. And we hear mainframe and we think, oh, this is super old school. But at the same time, most of our financial and any kind of large data where we can't have downtime, that still runs on mainframes as well. And so the biggest thing I can recommend there is find the job first, because oftentimes those employers won't kid themselves, right? They know that that's a legacy application or programming language. They know that people are not coming out of colleges or boot camps and being like, "Oh, I'm so cool. I just learned COBOL. I'm gonna or Fortran." Those aren't really taught anymore. But at the same time, a lot of those companies are looking for people either to maintain those applications, or they're coming in and saying, look, we know that we've got to replace this, but in order to understand how to build a new system for this, we also need you to know that language enough and be able to analyze what it's currently doing in order to migrate it to a newer application. And so I would say look for the job opportunities there, because those are going to be the jobs that are posted 2 years ago and they still have the postings open, right? And oftentimes they are going to say, look, we don't necessarily need you to be an expert in this. We just need you to be willing to learn an older language so that you can help us move to something newer. And so oftentimes in those cases, something like a big corporation like IBM is actually going to have training available to you for free, right? Where they're going to give you the curriculum, they're going to give you the videos. You get through all of that, you get a certification, and that certification is going to go miles in your job applications, right? Because the second you can say, hey, I'm IBM mainframe certified, they're going to look at that as the equivalent weight in some situations as a college degree. They're going to go, great, we need more mainframe people. That's what we're going to dive into. And like I said, that legacy does not mean bad thing. It does not mean that you're old. It just means that there are applications built on this that they need help getting off of that legacy. And the employer is not going to beat around the bush around that. They're not going to try and sell you on, hey, this is some new hot thing that they're going to tell you, hey, this is important because we've got millions of lines of code still built on this. And we not only need to maintain that, but we also need to have someone fresh-minded enough who is willing to analyze that and move it into newer sections of code. I don't know what what programming stack they are built off of. That may be got two approaches that we can take off of that. Mo, does that answer your question? Any follow-up questions on that before I move on?
No, that was perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's not to say that you can't dive into a legacy language. You can make a lot of money that way. But also realizing that there's a reason why it's legacy, and oftentimes those legacy opportunities are based more around senior positions. They're looking for people who are able to come in and fix a problem right out of the gate. And so that's also the flip side of learning a legacy language, is that it's harder to get experience in it because there are fewer smaller employers that are willing to take a risk on a junior developer. I did see a question on the chat, and then Harley, I'll come to you next. Is an epic built in a legacy language? And every program, every company, every software company is going to have what we call technical debt. And so when we hear about technical debt, we want to think about that as just like we think about monetary debt, right? So technical debt is the concept of, hey, I'm making a decision now to benefit me in the near term, but in the long term, that's going to cost me more money. Well, what does that sound like? Well, if I go to a bank, I go, hey, I need this money up front, and I'm going to get that. But in the long term, I'm going to pay interest on that. That is going to cost me more than the money that you have loaned me. That also applies in software engineering. So in software engineering, sometimes we make a decision where we go, I don't have the time to learn a new programming language. I don't have the time to do this right. So I'm going to pump out something quickly now that will meet that feature requirement, that will get me, get the job done. But in the long term, because I didn't do it right the first time, when I go to fix that, I'm going to have to pay the interest, the debt on that. So I'm going to have to now, when I go to do it the right way, I now need to deal with all of the data that generated over that time period. Or I'm going to have to deal with the fact that because I got it functional this hacky way, I now need to take more time to engineer it the right way and solve for it. And so that also becomes the case for any kind of technical debt of hey, I have to circle back on that. I may be using a programming language that is now no longer as popular, and because of that, it's going to be harder for me to hire for it. It's going to be harder for me to fix the problem in the long run. And so that's often where your first projects end up. You don't realize you're doing it the wrong way. You don't realize that you're taking shortcuts until you go to maintain it. And then 10 years later, 5 years later, you go back into that code and you go, oh man, now that I've got more experience, I wouldn't have done it that way. Okay, I want to circle back to one question of, doesn't Epic use a legacy programming language? So I'm curious to see what ChatGPT does here. I'm going to ask it a question of what technical stack and programming language is the Epic electronic health records company built in. Let's see what ChatGPT says here. Okay, so they say, obviously they're built in HTML and CSS, JavaScript, almost all web applications are. Okay, so cache object script appears to be the primary answer there. And that's where we may get into what we call a legacy programming language, mainly because it's not an industry standard. It's not used by multiple companies. It's not something that is taught in a lot of boot camps or colleges. And then I've never heard of mumps before. I don't have I've got more experience than most in electronic health record systems, but my primary experience with that is with a data standard called HL7, which is focused more on the data interchange than it is the particular language that the interface is built in. So interesting. Yeah. Looks like something proprietary, and proprietary languages are not bad in themselves. One of the most popular proprietary web application languages is .NET, which is written in a C#. That is maintained by Microsoft and has huge popularity. The benefit of using a proprietary language is that there is a company behind it maintaining it, compared to most programming languages, which are open sourced, meaning that it's just a community maintaining them. Jay Balunas works for works for Red Hat. Red Hat is one of the largest open source companies out there. He'll come in and do a guest speaking talk in a couple months, in a month or two, about open source. So if you are curious about that, that is coming down the pipeline. But open source compared to proprietary or commercial, definitely some interesting things in there, and that kind of all interrelates to legacy languages as well. Harley, you are finally up.
Are you aware of any previous students like myself who started with zero experience in this field? And are they doing anything as a career in this field? And also, has anyone from this program go on to do anything in like software sales?
Yeah, great questions. So I definitely know of a couple of our success stories. And that kind of branches into two kinds of success from this program, right? A lot of people go through this program and they learn more about what they don't want to do than what they do want to do. And that's okay, right? Because the field of IT is so broad that you can do IT or any kind of technology in almost any job field, right? Think about there are very few jobs that you can do today that don't involve at least a little bit of computer interaction. And even if you go to something to like, I'm going to become a road worker, right? And I'm going to go into construction. It's like, but you still got to clock in and clock out. You still have to interact with, well, where are the roads that you're constructing and the maps of all of that. And right, technology has infiltrated almost every part of our society that oftentimes that when you're going through this program, you're like, hey, I didn't even realize that user interface designer was a full-time role. So I may not want to go into full stack web development, but the design of all of this stuff is what's super interesting to me. And that's what I want to go into. But we also do have people who graduate the program and are now full stack web developers. Going all the way back to cohort 1, Caitlin Warby is a program manager still for Hack Upstate. She helps us out on the side, but she had a career of, as soon as she graduated back in either the end of 2019 or no, I think it was the end of 2019. She interviewed with Raymore and Flanagan, and Raymore and Flanagan said, we're looking for entry-level full stack developers. And she said, well, you use .NET. I didn't learn .NET. I don't know .NET. And they said, that's okay. You know the full stack web development principles. So she was there for a couple of years, kind of grew out of what we consider that entry-level role and more into a junior developer role. Got some experience there. I actually poached her from Raymore and Flanagan and hired her at our startup. And so she worked there for a little bit and then went to Syracuse University and is now working there as a full stack web developer. Was actually just involved in the Syracuse syr.edu relaunch. And so she works at their, I think it's technically the marketing department, and is building websites for SU now. So that is just one success story. We try to highlight success stories on our blog, the Hack Upstate Medium blog. But we definitely have had graduates take all of this knowledge, turn around and use them in full stack web development, but then what we also consider technical adjacent fields, right? So there are a lot of opportunities in project management where you need a technical background. It's kind of hard to manage something if you don't understand how that task is done. And so we do have a lot of graduates turn around and go into project management as well. We had a student end up at Terrakeet, which is a local Syracuse employer. We've got a lot of people come in from TCG Player and have had some opportunities there as well. So we definitely do see success stories. I can tell you I wouldn't be here teaching today if it were just a paycheck, right? I am a teacher because I like seeing where our students end up, how they take this knowledge and apply it professionally. And the careers part of Careers in Code is not just a name. So I do think that is important. You did have a second follow-up question there, and I forgot it. Sorry.
Has anyone from this program gone on to do anything in like software sales or any kind of sales related to this?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I know anyone off the top of my head who has gone into that. I can't think of anyone right off the bat. Project management definitely tends to be a more popular outcome of our program. That's not to say that you can't. It's definitely a job title that you can do. But I can't think of anyone off the top of my head where software sales was like the job title that they landed right after this. Hopefully that gives you a little background there.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sorry, I'm just catching up on the chat here. We hope to introduce you to more modules right now, right? And with that will come job titles. So right now you've only gotten a taste of front end user experience design, and then a little bit of project planning, both through the requirements planning, but then also as your capstone gets going, you'll start doing more project management. And that will open up the field there. We will get into kind of more classic computer science, which is getting into JavaScript. We will touch on databases only for a week, but databases can be a full-time job, both in the architecting of the data structure of that, and then also writing the queries, not only to work with that data, but then there is the entire field of data science, which is, hey, we've got all of this data, but we need to kind of meet in the middle between storing and managing all of that data, and then analyzing it through kind of more classic mathematical techniques. So data science kind of bridges the gaps there. We will get into back-end application development, building out APIs, and then, of course, the full stack nature, which is tying all three of those together, the database, the back-end, and the front end. And it really depends on the employer. Some employers will say we only hire full stack developers. We want to bring people in we can give them this task and say, this is what we need built, and they can build the whole thing. Compared to other companies who will say, well, we like to specialize a little bit more. So we're going to hire a designer and a front-end developer and a back-end developer and a database engineer. And we're going to expect those people to be experts in that particular area. There's no real guaranteed answer of which one is faster or which one is more efficient, but that is up to the company, and up to the company really to decide what technology stacks that they're hiring for as well. Yes, Caitlin, the mentor meetup, Caitlin is also helping out on the marketing side, all kinds of administrative tasks. But yes, Caitlin, graduate of cohort 1. Most of our program managers have graduated from our program and then have wanted to stay engaged. And then you'll also get to know our mentors a little bit more, both at OpenHack and once you're assigned one tomorrow, who will give you a little bit more context in terms of their journey through the program and how they use their experience to apply it professionally. Yes, Nicole is a graduate of the program. She works for the city of Syracuse. She went through an apprentice program through Careers in Code as well. I forget what her job title is directly, but she does work in the project management area. I don't think that's her exact job title. Mel Saffold is another graduate of the program who also works for, if not the city, the county. Don't quote me on that. But he is now managing technical projects as well. So lots of stuff going on there. I don't know of anyone off the top of my head who is doing embedded software design, but I do know a couple graduates who have gone to Lockheed Martin, and Lockheed Martin, they aren't allowed to tell us based off of their security clearance what they are doing. But Lockheed Martin does a lot more of kind of what we consider traditional computer science and computer engineering. And a lot of their applications are closer to embedded software design. So that is definitely a thing. Cornelius, I will come to your question next, but Joe has had his hand up, so I'm coming to you.
All right. I got a bunch, but I'll just stick with this one for now. What is the best way that I guess you personally stay informed with like the ever evolving tech stack and the world of technology and software development?
Yeah, so I would say combat shiny eye syndrome, right? Or shiny object syndrome, where we go, oh, that's new, that must be better, I gotta go learn that, right? So the first thing that I do is when I hear about something new, I try and compare it to something that I know. And so by anchoring it against something that I know, I can figure out why people are saying that it is better. And then the other thing I would say is trust your gut, because you can have 100 people say that it's better, but until you try it yourself, you won't be able to form an opinion on it. So doing what we call a POC, a proof of concept, is really, really helpful when we are learning new technologies, because we can go, all right, this is something that's kind of like a little throwaway project, right? Nothing may become of this. This is something that I'm going to spend a couple days on, no more than a week. But when I get to the end of it, I'm going to say, all right, I'm drawing a line in the sand. I'm only going to try this for a couple hours, a couple days. But when I'm done with it, I'm not going to get so attached to it that I'm going to feel guilty when I throw it out, or when I end up not using it, or when I end up not pursuing it. And so it's important to spend a couple hours, probably a month, I would say, on trying new things out. But at the same time, when someone throws that thing out there, follow up with questions, right? If you've got someone who is, I don't want to say bragging, but is excited about a new technology, those are also the people who will also be able to defend it or explain it the best. And so when you hear of that new thing, follow up, ask questions. What is this like? Excuse me, I have the hiccups. Why should I learn it? What is this most similar to? What can I build in this? Those kind of questions, but then turn around and try it, right? Because oftentimes we will find that this is not a better thing than what we are learning, or what we know. It is just an alternative. And so there's a really cool really cool website called roadmap.sh. And I will share this in the chat as well. And they've got all of these different roadmaps on things that you can learn. And so if we go into the front end one, you'll see that they list out not only concepts, but then also specific programming languages, right? And so the internet here, basic things, what's HTTP, what's the domain name, what is hosting, what's DNS? Those are all things that we will cover in 2 weeks when Nathan comes in for intro to DevOps. But then they break into HTML and CSS, the basics, layouts, responsive design. Hopefully these are all things that you're going, oh, those are pieces that we've touched on in the curriculum already. And then they walk you through JavaScript and Git, and then things that we'll be headed into, like we will learn NPM. Why am I bringing this up for your particular question? Because all 3 of these package managers accomplish the same exact thing. So NPM and Yarn are 2 of the more popular ones, but there's no reason to go and do a deep dive on Yarn if you already know NPM. And so if you scroll up here, they actually give you a little key of what the developer of this roadmap recommends. Alternative options, and then other things that either wouldn't recommend or that you could learn, but just keep in mind that these are an alternative, right? And so you will find things on this list. We are going to teach you React throughout the curriculum. But when you go to OpenHack, you're going to meet developers who use Vue.js or Angular. And so once you kind of figure out what category that falls into, you should follow up with, well, why do you like this more than this thing that I know? And if they give you an answer that you think is substantial enough or interesting enough, go do a proof of concept. Go say, you know what, I do this thing in React and I think it's annoying in React. I'm going to try and rebuild that in Vue or Angular and see if that is any better. But that shouldn't say that whatever you're learning is anything less substantial. It should just give you an opportunity to say, I know that there are alternatives out here, and I should think about this as kind of shopping for a car, right? When I shop for a car, there will be 5 manufacturers who all meet my budget requirements and my features requirements, but I may like this car more than someone else. And that doesn't mean that that other car is a bad car. It just means I got to shop around for it. So think about that the same way for your technology and say, hey, is this something truly new that I'm learning? Or is this an alternative to something that I already know? Answer your question?
Yes. Yes. The website actually helps quite a bit. That part of it was like, what do you use to stay informed about new things?
Yeah,
It was pretty
a
cool.
lot of that's being engaged in the community, whether that's a Slack community, whether that's in person, whether that's we're facing this world where a lot of software development jobs are going remote, and we lose company culture sometimes when we go fully remote. And so having some kind of happy hour or coffee hour or show and tell or some kind of meeting where you go, look, there's no agenda here. There's something that we have to accomplish, but this is just basically an opportunity for us to hang out and get to know each other. Oftentimes those kinds of events will be where things like that pop up. And I can't tell you, I got a message today of, hey, have you heard of Svelte? Do you have any opinions on it? And it's totally fine to say, no, I haven't, or I've heard of it, but I haven't had the time to dive into it or try it out. That is totally fine. And then the other part of that is saying, like, no, I haven't used that because my boss doesn't pay me to, right? My job pays me to write React code. That's what we use. And so that's what I know the best. But that also forms a really good basis for comparison when a new thing like that comes out, to say, hey, I'm going to play around with this thing. I'm not suggesting that we all use it, but is it okay if I spend a couple hours either at work or off the clock or on the weekend or whatever it is, to play around with that?
Thank you.
All right, Cornelius. Did I ever think after cohort 1 that we would continue up to this point? If so, have you ever thought about branching into hiring or considering different programming focuses for web development, MySQL, JavaScript, and having each week, month, various full stack modules? The short answer is yes. Hopefully at this point, you will realize that you will never get a completely short answer from me. So let me dive into that a little bit. First cohort, we ran the program. We had almost as many instructors. Actually, I think we had more instructors than we had students. And so when we first launched the program, we were very excited about the community. We had built a great community at Hack Upstate through the hackathons. When Jesse and Doug initially applied for the grant, I don't think they were planning on getting it. It was the first grant application that Jesse had ever wrote. And writing a grant is an art, right? It's kind of like writing a college essay application or a college essay. There's a certain formula to it. And once you learn it, it becomes much easier. But getting approved for a grant is definitely a skill in itself. And so when we started the program, we had so many instructors, and of course, all of those instructors come with different viewpoints, and opinions and backgrounds and languages they know and all of that stuff. We found that there was a disconnect because initially we were just trying to fit as many instructors as we could into the schedule. So we had some instructors say, oh, I can teach Tuesday and Thursday. We had some instructors say I could teach an entire week. We had some instructors say I can teach HTML, but I can't teach the entire 4-week module. And so we had a moment where a lot of the students were saying, like, this is great. I'm learning a lot of information, but I feel like there's a disconnect, right? I don't know how to keep all of this information in, or say, hey, this instructor is more right than another one. And so we only got approved for the first cohort for grant funding there. During the first cohort, we applied for additional funding, and they said, hey, you can run 3 additional cohorts over the next 3 years. And so that was a moment where we went, hey, this curriculum is kind of validated. The bootcamp model exists, right? And we've got the funding for it. So we were kind of surprised by that. But that funding has lasted us all the way up until this cohort. So this is our last AEI, Alliance for Economic Inclusion, grant funded cohort. All the other cohorts we've run have been through other grant opportunities or funding partners who got a grant and then hired us to run the program. So things that we learned pretty early on. More instructors does not necessarily mean better content. It means more collaboration that needs to happen. And so we got a lot better after the first cohort of saying, hey, for databases, we could teach you MySQL or Postgres or Mongo, but we shouldn't teach all 3 of them and then let you pick one. We should teach you one of them, do a deeper dive into that content. And then if you want to explore after you've got a really strong foundation, you can go out and try other things. So that is something that we learned. Throughout the second cohort, we reached the point where I somewhat accidentally ended up teaching roughly 2/3 of the cohort. And it turns out cohort 2 went a lot better than cohort 1 did. And so Jesse at that point said, hey, can you come on full time? Which Tiffany, that's going to lead me into your question. But can you come on full time and teach the majority of it? So we still have guest instructors coming in. Ryan is a better software engineer than I am, hands down. Ryan has a different teaching style. I do think it's important to expose you to different ones of them. So Ryan will come in and teach for a couple weeks. We also have Nathan coming in 2 or 3 weeks, and he's a much better DevOps engineer than I will ever be. So he's going to teach you that side of things. But that's kind of how the program evolved. It's kind of interesting because it is grant funding. Grant funding is one of those things that takes forever to apply for and forever to hear back from. But once you do hear back, it is practically guaranteed. It's not like the grant is ever going to run out of money, except for a little thing called COVID, which was definitely put a pause on things as we were going. But after cohort 1, no, we did not. We thought that this was going to be a shot in the dark. We thought that we got the funding, so we'll see how one cohort goes. And we must have done something right, because they then turned around and gave us 3 more years of funding. With that said, we've been running this program now since 2019, obviously 6 cohorts. We are now at the point where we're saying, okay, a lot has changed in the world since 2019. And the job market has also changed as well. We went through this boom of needing more software engineers in 2019 that took off even more during the pandemic, where technology was getting us through the pandemic. So we saw even more jobs open up. And now we are seeing the rubber band effect, right? We overshot on hiring. We had too many engineers hired by these big companies, and now we're seeing all of these layoffs in the news. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that, right? That is definitely something that you want to think about. So we are thinking about cohort 7 and going, all right, how is cohort 7 going to be different? Maybe it isn't a 6-month cohort. Maybe it isn't full stack web development. Maybe we look into something like Google has a lot of certificates available and curriculum attached to it. So we've looked at that. We've looked at Erie 21 is a program with Lemoyne, and Lemoyne's going through a similar thing. They have a similar mission. They have funded 2 or 3 of our cohorts. I think 2 of our cohorts. And so we've worked with them. We're looking at Center State CEO, right? Very connected to the local community, local employers. And so we're collaborating with them and figuring out, all right, what does cohort 7 look like? But at the same time, you can't really call yourself a full stack developer unless you complete all of the modules of our program. But that doesn't mean that we can't run our program and train someone other than full stack web developers. So that is all something that we're considering of how do we break this up? Do we look at more asynchronous models, right? There's the whole idea of a MOOC, which is the massive online learning communities of where we pre-record all of these videos. The one thing that I want to be very careful that we don't lose there is the sense of community, right? Because as you guys go through this program, you're going to learn on lean on each other. You're going to learn from each other. But there's something to be said about having 19 of you go through the program all at the same time, and have that sense of community, right? Because when I say you got to watch 12 hours of videos a week, you're like, do I really have to, right? Can I skip out on some of those? But it's not only attendance, it's that you see all of these familiar faces here. You know that you're all learning it at the same time. There is something to be said about the cohort model of learning the same content with a live person, with the same people, all going through it at the same time. So all things to consider there. We certainly have considered modifying the model. We also have considered the notion of what happens when you graduate, right? Because one thing that we find the entire industry, not just our graduates, are struggling with is we hear about the career ladder all the time, and we hear about climbing the career ladder, and we hear about junior and senior developers. But one thing that we find our graduates struggle with is not advancing on the career ladder. It's getting on the career ladder. It's those first couple rungs, right? Of how do I get my first position? How do I transition from entry level to junior level? How do I really start advancing on that? And so we've looked at some models of, well, what if we provided some kind of internship, right? Where there was a dev shop model where we could hire some of our top graduates. We could get them that experience and then have them ultimately have the goal of leaving, right? We aren't trying to keep you forever. We're just trying to get you boosted, get you that first level of career experience, and then get you accelerating on your career that way. So lots of opportunities out there. We've looked at asynchronous versus synchronous. We've looked at the whole MOOC model. We've looked at trying to not lose that cohort experience, but still having you be able to not have to tune in every single night, 5:30 to 8:30, all different kinds of things that we've looked at into there. You will see all of my answers or rants, but hopefully that answered your question. Any follow-up questions before I move on to Tiffany's question?
I was gonna say that answers everything perfectly because I'll say I know you gotta answer this. I'll just say this quick. Like before this cohort, I have signed up for a lot of Udemy courses, and it's just like like Udemy, like if when you sign up for those courses, they focus on one thing, and then with this cohort, you are branched out. It was just like my thought, like you explained, was there a mindset of just like having each different and it's still careers and code, but you ever have like different professors? So like if people want to focus on SQL, if they want to focus on JavaScript and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the thing that annoyed me in my college career, which again, I didn't fully finish that, so I can't rest on it too much. The other thing is I probably should have done computer engineering as my degree, and instead I did IT. but lessons learned, right? There's some crazy statistic. The vast majority of college graduates don't work in a field that is pertaining to their college degree. So, but the one thing that annoyed me the most there is that I would take a database course or a website design course or whatever it was, and then I'd reach the end of it and it would be like, okay, you're done, on to the next thing. And there was no sense of connection there. And so the one thing that we would really have to change about our curriculum is our entire curriculum builds on each other. So yes, even though that you're at the end of the HTML and CSS module, as soon as we get into JavaScript, couple days into it, all of a sudden HTML is going to come back and we're going to need to build an interface with it, right? And then as soon as we're done with JavaScript, we're going to get into the back-end full stack API side of things, and you're still going to need the JavaScript to write all of that over there. And so the challenge with breaking up our curriculum and going for kind of what you would see in a classic course structure is that everything is really interrelated in our curriculum. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, right? I think that that gets you not only more practice with these new concepts that you're learning, but it also shows you how it all fits together. Because in very few jobs are you going to be asked to just do that one course that you took in college or that one module. You are going to be expected to have to interrelate them all, right? And especially in full stack web development, be able to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript, SQL, front end, back end, all of that interrelated. And so that's what I really enjoy about our curriculum, is that it's not only all building on each other, but it is very much real world, right? If I had the opportunity when I graduated high school to do a boot camp instead of college, would have done it in a heartbeat. But I just didn't know they existed, right? And I do think that not only the unified curriculum, but the sense of going through it together is a really important part of what we do. I'm also really proud of our dropout rate, right? Our very low dropout rate, I should say. We help people over the finish line, and that's through one-on-ones, that's through everyone learning together. That's through engagement of following up of when you're not doing your homework or all of a sudden you're not showing up in class. And I think that that's all really important, and to identify how you learn best, because at the end of this program, you're not going to be done learning, right? You're going to have the skills that you need to go get that entry level job. But when you get that job, they're going to say, we use this other programming language. You got to go learn that. And now throughout all this program, you're going to be able to say, oh, project-based learning is what I learned the best from. I'm going to go find this project, learn this new programming language through that, and go from there. Or you're going to say, I found this guy on YouTube that I really like, and he has or she has a video in this programming language, so I'm going to go learn that way, right? A lot of this program, I already said, is learning what you don't want to do. A lot of this program is also learning how you learn and being able to apply that to other topics. Okay, follow-up question, or next question, I should say. How do you manage your time between two jobs? Not well is my answer to that. So I do work two full-time jobs. At the end of the second cohort, Jesse said, hey, this is going really well. I would love for you to be the lead instructor. I'd love to bring you on essentially full-time. And he said, I can do that for 30 hours a week. And I said, okay. I said, let me think about it. And I really did have to think about it, right? Because where you want to head in your career, sometimes opportunities fall in your lap, and other times you don't necessarily know where your career is headed, but you're not happy with where it's at. And that definitely wasn't the case for me. I worked with my boss for 5 or 6 years at that point. We're a startup, so it was for the vast majority of the time just me and him. I had the opportunity to grow a team underneath me. I knew that I could pass most of what I was doing off to another person at that point. And I said, all right, I don't have any background in education. I don't have any training in education. But I feel like I'm making a really good impact for careers in code, and I feel like teaching is where I want to head into. And so there's a really tough conversation to have with my boss, right? Of essentially putting in my 2 week notice. But I didn't quite frame it that way. I said, well, I'll stick around until you find a replacement for me. I realize that this will be a tough transition. And so we went that way where I was working part-time at my first job, focusing a lot of my time on teaching. And then 2 or 3 months went by, and my boss said, "Hey, can we just keep doing this?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't mean to work 2 jobs, but the money's really good working 2 jobs." So the biggest thing I can sorry, Amazon's delivering a package right now, so if you hear my dog barking, I apologize. Um, and so it kind of just fell into my lap that both of my employers were okay with me working both jobs. And a lot of that falls down to this whole program's 5:30 to 8:30, so you guys can continue working a job or a more traditional job, and also participate in this program. So I never would have been able to do that. I also would be very hesitant to ever hide one job from another employer, right? If you are working 2 jobs, it is best to be honest with your employer. It's not a legal requirement by any means. You definitely can do it. But one of the ways that I manage my time is I built a bot that syncs my calendars, right? And so when you guys book a one-on-one with me, it not only shows up in my personal calendar, my Hack Upstate calendar, but it also shows up in my Tuesday calendar, which is the name of the startup that I work at. So I don't hide anything. I'm completely transparent, right? I'm not going to say, oh, I've got a one-on-one. I'm going to say I've got a doctor's appointment, or I'm just going to disappear. I'm fully transparent with both of my employers of at this time I'm meeting with someone else. I'm not working those hours. And so I break my day really into 4 parts. The first part is meetings, whether that is meetings with the startup, meetings with you guys as students, meetings for careers in code for future cohorts, meetings for logistics of this cohort, whatever it is, meetings are always the #1 priority. Never be more than a minute or 2 late to a meeting. If you are, send a message. I live my life out of a calendar. I can count on on one hand the number of times that I've like completely missed a meeting, right? Really, really important to show up when you say you're going to show up. So meetings always take #1 priority for me. #2 priority is anything that I'm going to hold someone else up on. So if I'm working with someone else and they go, I need you to look into this, or I can't do the next step until you work on this, or I need feedback on this piece of code, I always make sure that I am not personally the roadblock as much as I can. So that always takes second priority. Third priority is I need to prioritize what I'm working on outside of that. Once I've cleared roadblocks for anyone else, whether that's for careers in code, whether that's for TUZAG, I need to have my own list prioritized because there are things that I will want to work on, and then there are things that need to get done in a certain order. And so I always try and prioritize that. I am fully remote, and so being in the right headspace is really important. When I'm in my office, I am working. When I am not in my office, I am not working, right? The washing machine goes off, the buzzer's ready, I gotta go fold laundry. I cannot work that way, right? I cannot, oh, I'll go fold laundry and I'll jump on that next. No, 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 no. I come in at 9 a.m. and I am working until 3 p.m. I try and take a break as much as I can from 3 to 5, 3:30 to 5, somewhere, or 5:30, somewhere roughly in there. And then I'm in teaching mode, right? And when I'm in teaching mode, that turns on and I'm working 5:30 to 8:30 kind of thing. And then the fourth thing, and this is going to sound really dumb, sleep. You have to prioritize sleep because you're going to come into this profession and there's always going to be another thing that needs to be done. I am a big proponent of irregular sleeping schedules. Some of the greatest minds of our time did what we call biphasic sleep. I don't think I would be where I am in my career today without biphasic sleep. My first internship was at a small little company called AOL. Yes, they were still relevant back when I had that opportunity. And I was programming in Java, which is what the language that they used. But I knew I wanted to learn server-side application development, and I knew I wanted to learn PHP. And so I got in a really weird sleeping schedule that was terrible for my social life, but great for my career and my education. I'd wake up at 8 a.m., I'd go work 9 to 5, I'd come back at 6 p.m., and I would sleep from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I would wake up at 10 p.m., have dinner, stay up until 4 a.m., program in PHP, which was a great reset for me because I found I couldn't work in both languages at the same time. My brain just couldn't switch over right after a full workday. So I got that 4 hours of sleep, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'd wake up, I would program in PHP from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. I would sleep from 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. I would get up at 8 a.m., get ready for the day, go to work at 9 a.m. It sounds absolutely nuts. Turns out they've done a ton of studies on this, and biphasic sleep has a lot of science-based evidence behind that. So it turns out that the duration that you sleep is important. You do have to go through all 4 stages to hit REM sleep, but you can hack your sleeping schedule. I don't do that to that extent anymore. Fortunately, I've reached a point in my career where I am largely programming in programming languages that are consistent. But the reason I take a break from 3 to 5 is I got a nap, right? I've learned at this point that teaching is really tiring. You feel like you're on stage, you feel like you're performing. You want to keep that energy up so other students are vibing off of you, right? And keeping their energy up because your energy is up. And so part of that has been I take a 2-hour nap from 3 to 5 or 3:30 to 5:30 or whatever it is, right? Because that resets my brain. I get a full REM cycle in. It doesn't affect my I don't wake up groggy because I'm getting that full cycle in. So anyway, managing my time between jobs, I definitely have to prioritize. I am not a strict, I work 9 to 3 at 2ZAG and then 5:30 to 10 or whatever it is at Careers and Code. But the way that I manage all of that is prioritization, basically. And so some weeks I will work 10 hours at the startup and 50 hours at Careers and Code. Some weeks I will work 30 hours at the startup and only teach for 12 hours, and I'm feeling really good about that week, right? But at the end of the day, prioritization is going to happen. There are going to be things that need to get done. And fortunately, I found in the 2.5 years now, 2 years, I can't remember, that I've been working both jobs, is that prioritization is going to strike a pretty healthy balance between the 2 jobs, and that's what I run off of. So whenever I add a task to my list, it doesn't get added to the end of the list. Well, it does to start. And then before I start on it, before I go back to whatever I'm working on, I reprioritize my list. I slide that in. And there are some weeks that are great, and I only work 30 hours, and I'm like, woohoo! And there are other weeks that I work 60, 70 hours, beginning of the cohort, the end of the cohort, whatever it is. And that's just life, right? So I try and strike a work-life balance there of 40 hours or 30 hours, or there's not a set number between the jobs. But I do try and prioritize and realize, like, hey, I'm getting really stressed here. I either need to ask for help from another team member, or I need to check in with the prioritization and let someone know a deadline may be a day or 2 late. And oftentimes people come back and they go, I didn't even expect you to get that done that quickly, or, oh, that's no big deal, or, life happens. And so all of that is important to prioritize and keep in mind. Before I dive into what I do for fun, it is break time. Go on break, be back at 7:25. We will do attendance when we get back. Go on break, and I will continue answering questions. Looking forward to the ones I got in the chat. Welcome back, everyone. All right, diving back into our AMA here. Harley asked, what do I do for fun? Program and teach. No, just kidding. I am a lot more exciting than that, all right? I think I am, at least. I'm currently in the middle of a huge garden renovation. I bought my house out in Manlius 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Almost to the month, actually. And so I'm a big fan of growing things from seed. I had a landscape plan done. I just got 2 apple trees in, 2 peach trees, and a plum tree. If that is exciting to you, you are officially a gardener. If that is not exciting to you, I don't know what to tell you. It's just plants and soil. It's really, really boring otherwise. Pro tip, Okra, the recycling agency, has really good high quality mulch and compost for really, really cheap. The Amboy and Jamesville sites have it, and it is the secret to all of my gardening success in central New York in the past 7 years or so that I've been doing it. So I really love gardening. I try and have something lined up for almost every weekend, whether that's some central New York event, whether that's a hike. I love to travel, whether that's going down to my parents' house, or I've got some friends over in Rochester, or this weekend I'm headed to bumfuck Pennsylvania, middle of nowhere, just to meet up with some friends. It's a halfway point. So love to travel, love to garden, cross country ski every now and then in the winter. I have done the 5-borough bike tour twice now, which is really fun in New York City. They shut down all of the streets. It's like 45 miles riding through the city there. I do find that physical health is very important, so I go to the gym twice a week. Yes, that is something I have to schedule in my calendar, or it just will not happen. So I love the Manlius YMCA because it's small and old, and the clientele are also very similar to what I just described. So like going down there, hanging out there. But that is pretty much what I do for fun. I will also work on side projects as well, in coding. That isn't like the top of my fun list, but it is good to do side projects, like the calendar syncing bot and the YouTube uploading bot are 2 things that I have done. The projects I did in college were fun to, actually have an objective and shoot for those. So I do consider those fun outside of work. And then I am either a really great homeowner or a really terrible homeowner, because I don't hire anyone for anything. I will go spend 40 hours on YouTube learning how to do something that should only take 15 minutes, and then dive into electrical work or plumbing work, or all things that I really shouldn't be doing but do anyway. So like being a DIYer as well. Hopefully that answers the question, gives you a little more perspective.
Yes, I actually went to Crazy Daisies today for the first time. Have you been there?
No, I haven't. How was it?
It's awesome. I found some rare plants because I'm kind of a gardener, so that's a
Okay.
really cool place to check out. They have like lemon trees and weird things that you just wouldn't think. So
I'm
definitely-
doing a lemon and a lime tree this year for the first time. I just got them potted up.
Check it.
Nice. Yeah, definitely will. Yeah, I love doing things, growing things from seed. I definitely thought the police were gonna like bust in my house and think I was growing something, because my entire basement was purple for a long time. And I'm like, no, it's all just seeds and flowers. It's not anything more fun. I also love, I'm a whiskey fan, love drinking whiskey. So that is definitely fun after a 12-hour work day. That is usually my guilty pleasure. All right. Next question. Is there a language or technical concept you're learning right now? Surprisingly, there isn't. I've been pretty comfortable in JavaScript for a while now. I guess the closest you could consider to that is I'm building a React Native app at work right now. So I'm working on a mobile app. I am surrounded right now by remote patient monitoring devices. So I've got a pulse oximeter right here. Oddly, I've got a scale under my desk. I've got all different kinds of remote patient monitoring devices. This is my first foray into Bluetooth hardware. So I am building an app right now that can retrieve Bluetooth low energy readings and store them, send them up to an API, and store them for a care coordinator to basically review all of that. So that's what I'm doing at the day job. Haven't worked with Bluetooth before, so that's kind of fun. Not technically a language, but I guess it is more of a concept. Sometimes they come from work. Sometimes they pop up at OpenHack or my last. I've got two projects kind of on my radar. One is I don't have a TV. I have a projector instead. And the power button doesn't work with universal remotes, but it uses a different protocol than the rest of the remote, which is really, really annoying. So I've gone down a rabbit hole of at least 5 hours of doing all of the research of how to build a universal remote myself, because I've tried spending like hundreds of dollars and no universal remote works. So I've just reached a point where I'm like, screw it, I'm going to learn it myself. And then the other project is I've got my couch has like motorized recliners built into it. And because almost everything in my house is connected to the internet, last time I counted, I was close to 100 different internet connected devices. Yes, I live alone, so that is even more concerning. But one thing that I looked into was hooking up my recliner to Alexa, so I could say, Alexa, I'm lazy, and actually have it like raise up the recliner for me. So that is another concept that I've looked into. Just getting dangerous enough with electricity where, you know, I'm not going to kill myself, but at the same time could get that connected to the internet. So those are some technical things that I am looking into. Preferred book, tutorial series, learning new languages or softwares. I am a huge Medium fan. I love reading blog posts. I am ironically not a huge fan of learning on video, because I either want it too fast or I want it so fast that I miss something and then get even more frustrated with it and have to go back and review it. So not the biggest fan of learning from video. Really love blog posts because those blog posts tend to be project focused. So they are very much like, this is how you build the login screen using this, this, and this. And there's no deviation. There's no, oh, I got to go learn another thing. It's like they tell you up front what you're going to get and you get it all the way through. And there's a date on it so that you know, hey, I'm not learning something that was updated and is now broken because they haven't updated this. It's pretty clear to see that. I've flirted with the idea of actually writing my own textbook, because I think the way that I teach is very practical. It's very experience-based. And so I've thought about my own textbook. I've read 3 or 4 different textbooks and have not been a huge fan of them. That's not to say that they're a bad idea for you. It's just that that's not my personal learning style, so it's kind of harder for me to incorporate it. There is, however, a list of textbooks in Canvas, and that list has been generated all from previous students. So if you go to Canvas and take a look under the assignments and the week, oh, where did I put that? The week 5 JavaScript module pre-reading. There is a whole list of textbooks down here that people have recommended. I definitely recommend either seeing if the local library has them. I'm a huge library proponent. Or reading them or trying them out before your return window closes, because as with most learning resources, you're either going to love them or hate them. So just take that with a grain of salt. All of these are very different. All of them are going to approach the content a little differently. But the one nice thing about programming is when we say a for loop is the same thing in Java and Python and JavaScript and Ruby and all of that kind of stuff. So the concepts will be the same there. But I will wrap that question up by saying have an objective in mind, whether it's your capstone project, whether it's a smaller proof of concept. I had major imposter syndrome when I started at the startup because I had no one I could lean on. I had no one that I could ask questions of. I was really the only developer. And initially I was hired, my title was Rapid Prototyping Specialist, which basically meant, hey, I'm going to give you this small little tiny thing to build. And if it works and the client wants it, we'll hand it off to a contracted dev team who has a lot more experience and they will build out the entire app for us. Turns out that contract team was not as high quality as we thought they were. And 2 months into the job, I started rebuilding the entire application that they had basically built. And so the one redeeming moment, I should say, is I talked to my boss's son who had just gotten hired at Google. So I was like, all right, you know your crap here. And we spent 2 hours on a screen share and we got to the end of it and he was like, this is the crappiest code I've ever seen. I can't believe you have to deal with this. And I'm like, oh, it's not just me. Like I might actually be able to do this job, you know? And so the hardest part of that was asking for help and saying like, this may be me, this may be the code. I got to be vulnerable here and say, I'm not going to last in this job unless we bring someone in who can kind of help me through it. And so definitely ask for help, definitely find learning resources that work for you. Finding a mentor, which obviously I owe you guys and we'll get you assigned one soon, match you up with one. But having that mentor at work, even if they aren't in the specific programming language that you're using, but someone you can just bounce ideas off of, you can rubber duck with, whether they work for your employer or don't work for your employer. Just finding a mentor is very, very important throughout your journey here, because even now I still face imposter syndrome sometimes. And just being able to vent is the number one way to combat that. But also realize that a lot of people publishing Medium articles or YouTube videos or even textbooks may not have the career experience you would expect them to have. I had a really, really frustrating experience in college. We were learning project management, and this was back in like 2014, and I got really excited for the agile section because most companies at that point had started transitioning over to it. And we got to that week in the curriculum and the professor said, no one uses agile, I'm not going to teach this, and just went on. And I was like, oh, I was really looking forward to this. This is like part of the curriculum. Can we please cover this? And he said, no one uses agile. It's this new concept that people haven't, that business hasn't adopted. And the smart ass that I was at the time, I mean, still clearly a smart ass, but hopefully a little less so now. I said, oh, well, I just finished an internship at AOL and they're using it. So kind of think it's an important concept to learn. And the professor turned around and said, well, if you're such an expert in it, why don't you teach it? And the next class I did, I lectured on agile and how we use it for an hour and a half. And that shut him up really quickly. So be careful of who you're learning from, including myself, right? Don't be afraid to ask questions. When you are learning a concept, you want to know why it's important to learn that concept before you learn the concept itself. Make sure you're prioritizing your time. One of the most important investments, most valuable things you have is your time. But also don't be afraid to get halfway through a course. Other than us, of course, you got to finish this. But other than careers in code, don't be afraid to get a little of the way into something and then go, this just isn't the right fit for me. I don't like the teacher. I don't like the learning style, whatever it is. Don't be afraid to push back on that and find additional resources and ask fellow developers, right? I got started with Medium articles. I got started by my boss saying, this is what I need changed. And I went, I don't know that language. And he said, go learn that language. What is the best way I found those resources? I had that objective in mind. I knew what I needed to accomplish. And because of that, I had the motivation to push through the learning hiccups and get through it. But no, unfortunately, no particular book series that I like. If anyone would like to offer me an advance on a textbook, let me know, and I'll get to get down to writing that in my copious amounts of free time. Yes, writing grants is an art. Glad that you're here with us. Being able to quickly stop to fix code is a big help over distance learning. Yeah, absolutely. And part of that cohort mentality for sure. Sorry, I'm just catching up on the chat here. During all of the cohort, you had taught what topic was easy for your students to grasp and what's the most and what's the most challenging module. If you had to reteach all of your students, what would you do differently? All great questions. HTML is definitely the one where it's like, that's where I know you're going to get it or you're not going to get it. If you're struggling to pick up patterns in HTML and understand that, oh, this H1 tag is exactly the same as a P tag, and I understand, the differences between the two of them. I believe all of you are there. That's definitely the one of the easier concepts. That also extends to one of the hardest concepts, which is JavaScript, because JavaScript is all of computer science. And obviously you can get a 4-year bachelor's degree and even a master's degree in computer science. So we don't do a super deep dive. We're not going to get into binary. We're not going to get into compiling. The thing that I kind of learned earlier on in my career, and that I've kind of built my entire teaching career around, is the notion of a developer versus an engineer, right? And this is not industry gospel. This is not agreed upon by everyone. But I take a really strong stance between an engineer and a developer. So if you want to think about it as engineer is someone who is painting the puzzle pieces, right? They are so focused in on a tiny little thing, and they do that one thing really well, compared to a developer who is the one who is assembling that puzzle together. So what I am teaching you guys to be is a developer, not necessarily an engineer. And you can't have one without the other. Obviously, there are parts of engineering that you will learn as a developer, and there are things that you have to do as a developer, even if you are an engineer. But the way you want to think about this is, am I going to make one tiny little cog work really well and really efficiently? Or am I going to be the one assembling all of those cogs together to make an engine? And so my teaching perspective has always been that the world needs more developers than they need software engineers. And that's a really hard thing to prove because, again, not all companies agree on this. A lot of companies go, we're hiring software engineers, and you get into the job and it turns out that they want what I call a developer, right? They want someone who says, this is what we need, go build this. And you go, but what language should I use? Or what framework should I use? Or can I use this tool? And they go, sure, just build it, right? We want you to build it efficiently. If we all agree on the tool, if we all agree upon the language, we want you to use those, but we want you to build this using growing off the shoulders or standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Other people better at writing code than you have built frameworks, they built these tools, they've built packages, they built all of this stuff. A developer's job is to still know the engineering concepts, but to build something efficiently. An engineer, on the other hand, is someone who's going to get more into the nitty gritty and go, hey, Google has 4 trillion results in its database. We need to be able to effectively search through them in milliseconds. How do we do that? Well, that's going to be more of that engineering perspective, right? Or an engineer is going to look and work for a bank, and the bank's going to say, we need to better predictively model which of our customers are a right fit for a loan. And so you're going to have to get into the engineering of that and get into the data analysis and pull in additional sources and all of that kind of stuff. Maybe not the best example of an engineer, but you get my point, right? Of engineering and developer. I like to differentiate between those two. Again, not all employers will. And even at OpenHack, you could say, what's the difference between an engineer and a developer? And you're going to get 10 different answers if you ask that 10 different times. But I do think it's important to differentiate between the two of them. And so that's something that I am training you guys to be developers. I'm training you to be as practical as hands-on, hit the ground running kind of approach to things. But oftentimes you will hear the two interchangeably used. Most challenging for students, hands down, people bitch about JavaScript more than anything else. It is something that it doesn't matter if we spend 4 weeks on it, which we do, or 40 weeks on it. It's something that just takes time to grasp because it is true computer science. It is an exponential ramp up between HTML, which you're like, all right, I think I'm getting this. I'm not an expert in it, but like I can build a site, I get the grid, all of this is great. And then you hit JavaScript and you're like, whoa, this is a totally different world. The good news is JavaScript is definitely the peak of the most challenging part of the program. Once you get on the flip side of that, everything is just a combination of JavaScript and HTML. Obviously a lot more to learn, but JavaScript becomes very quickly the most challenging part, and then the flip side of that is that it does exponentially back off and get easier towards the end of the program. If I had to reteach all of my students, what would I do differently? Really great question. I try to incorporate that as much as I can in the 30-second feedback form. I do read those every single night. I try to not save up all of my feedback until the end of the cohort. That drove me crazy in high school and in college, where they would give you the end of the semester feedback form. And I'm like, well, at this point, it's too late for the professor to change to benefit me at all. So why did we wait until the end to provide this feedback? So I try, and you guys know that there was an interview question, right, of how do you close a feedback loop or shorten a feedback loop in your application? That is all a feedback loop is someone provides me feedback, and instead of waiting all the way until the end of the course, I'm going to incorporate that feedback, try something new, gain additional feedback, and get that going even sooner. That's something that we obviously do in our code all the time, right? We try it, it doesn't work, the layout's in the wrong spot, the row broke, the icon doesn't show up, whatever it is. We get the feedback from the computer, we do something else in our code, and then we test it, get more feedback, introduce that all the way in, right? The same goes for everything that we do in our career. Being receptive to feedback, bringing that in is really important. If I could reteach all of my students, the one part of our program that I really struggle with that I would really like to improve upon is the first couple rungs of that career ladder. I can only teach so much. But the flip side of that is going out there, getting that first job, and feeling supported enough in that job that you can progress from entry level into the junior level. So I don't know that I've thought a lot about that. But that is the one thing that I hope that I can benefit students in the future from. I hope that by the time we get to the end of the program, we have a better answer for you on that. Laura does an amazing job both throughout the program and towards the end of the program of thinking about your career side of the careers in code. But that is something that I definitely wrestle with is job placement numbers and how to help you guys get onto that career ladder so you can take it off. Take your careers off, have your careers take off. That's what I'm trying to say. 2 reasons I like working at a startup and 2 reasons I dislike it. I'm gonna cheat and say there's an answer that spans both of them. One, I get to do everything, and I also hate that I have to do everything. So what do I mean by that? When something breaks, we've gone from having a team of 5 developers. Right now we're back down to a team of 1 developer. Me and only me. So that means that when something breaks, I'm the only one who can solve that problem. that kind of stinks, right? That's a dislike because I'm on the hook there. And if I, am taking the evening off and something pops up, I'm the one that has to fix it. That is also one of the reasons why I loved getting my career started at a startup, was because I learned so much, and everything that I learned was based out of something practical. It wasn't go learn this language for the sake of learning this language. It was, this is what needs to get built. Go, now you know what you have to learn, go learn that thing. So it is a double-edged sword there. Absolutely love that. The other thing that I love about a startup is there's no I don't want to say there's no HR bullshit, but there's open communication, right? If I need something done, I go right to that team member and I ask for it to get done. I don't have to go to my manager who goes to their manager, and something gets lost in that communication chain and then they got to pass that down. I open Slack, I find their name, I send them a message, I talk to them directly, right? Our startup has gotten up to 11 employees. Like I said, right now we are only down to 2. But when we were bigger, breaking down the departmental barriers, and saying, no, just because you're on the content team doesn't mean you can't talk to the technical team. Having that open communication has really been great. And that expands to, because I've been so early on at a startup, being able to encourage that culture, not feeling like remote was a barrier, and actually taking advantage of all of the benefits of remote working has been great. We did go, excuse me, we went remote a little, like a year and a half before the pandemic. We actually had an office at Coworks when it was still Coworks and not Common Space. We were both commuting in 20, 30 minutes each way. And then what would we do? We would put on headphones, start a conversation, and then go, wait, this will be better in Slack. And we would literally turn away from each other and have the conversation in Slack instead, because it was documented, right? Because it was something that we knew we wanted to go back and review. And if we had it in person, we would have forgot about what we said. So we went fully remote. That was one of the best decisions that we could have made. Remote working is really, really important. You guys know, as remote students, having your workspace is important, having that area that you can focus. At one point, this startup shut down, and then when it started back up, I told my boss, I said, I'm not ready for a remote. I'm not going to be productive unless I'm in an office. And then once I kind of figured out my space, once I figured out the hardware that helped me be productive, once I got in the right mental space for working remotely, that was a huge thing that really helped out. The other thing that I really dislike about a startup is that there is oftentimes a runway for how long your employer can pay you. Oftentimes when you're working at a larger company, that is done at a huge budget level. When they do layoffs, they are laying off a good percentage of the company. They're budgeting it out for years at a time. And even if the revenue turned off tomorrow, they still have a budget. They can still have stable employment for you. Working at a startup, I will say my boss has never missed a payroll. He has been late on quite a few payrolls. And that's something that just comes with working at a startup. So if you are ever interviewing at a smaller company, always ask what the company size is. Working at a 2-person company, a 20-person company, a 200-person company, and a 2,000-person company, and a 200,000 person company, all is very, very different, right? So if you're working at that smaller company, there are trade-offs like payroll stability, and you definitely should be asking about that in an interview, right? And that's going to be an uncomfortable topic for you. It's going to be an uncomfortable topic for your employer. But if you're working at a company size 200 or under, one of the things that you should ask is, what does the payroll runway look like? How far have you budgeted out? If our investment stop tomorrow, if our revenue stop tomorrow, how long are you going to be able to continue to pay me? Really tough topic. And unfortunately, in our society, talking about your salary is a taboo subject, and I absolutely hate that. I never think salary should be taboo. I think that that should be transparent. There are all kinds of studies in other first world countries where they publish salary ranges, and it shows how skewed that is when salary is a taboo topic, of how much it benefits the employer, not the employee, especially with gender pay gaps, with there's just all kinds of inequality in salary, and being transparent about salary can be really, really beneficial to closing those pay gaps and making sure that everyone gets paid fairly. But anyway, yes, I think I covered 4 things there. But yeah, startups, love it. It's a great place to start your career. I don't know that you need to spend your entire career in it, in working for a startup. But absolutely have loved it so far. And the fact that I'm still there 8 years later should speak a lot to how much I enjoy working at a startup. Joe, my day job is spelled Tuzag. I will put our link in the chat.
Right away. We will see the
It's a really weird name. The reason that we have it spelled that way is because it's a totally made up word. My boss built his career at marketing agencies. And one of the things that they said is that your company name should have an ascender, a descender, and a weird letter in it. And so what do I mean by that? The T goes above the font baseline, the G goes below it, and then the Z is the weird letter in the middle. The downside to that is no one can spell it. And unfortunately, that domain name shockingly was not available. It was a Turkish cement company, I believe Turkish. And we still have not to this day been able to get the domain name. So our domain name has changed 3 times to tuz.ag for Antigua. And then that was getting caught in spam filters, so we went to tuzag.co, and then no one could type our email. Everyone thought it was tuzag.com, so we just changed it to wearetuzag.com. It's gone through a couple iterations there. Okay, let me try and catch up on the chat here. Ooh, lots of questions. Okay, I promise I will try and go a little bit more rapid fire. How do I feel about engineering apprenticeships? I am a huge, huge fan of apprenticeships. I absolutely hate when education is done in a vacuum. I hate that when we teach curriculum, because curriculum's always been taught that way for 30 years or 40 years. That may fly in traditional education. That does not fly in industry, right? When there is a problem with a language, when there is a problem with a tool, when there is a better way to do something, our industry, especially thanks to capitalism, finds a better way to do it. And I believe that that should retroactively apply to education. Education should try and keep up. But apprenticeships and internships, I think, are probably the best way to get your career started. Other than maybe entrepreneurialism, which is obviously fraught with its own peril. But I'm a huge fan of apprenticeships, especially if the employer is used to running them. Whenever you start an apprenticeship, try and find someone who has gone through it at that company. Make sure that the company does it well, because you can get hired as an intern or apprentice, and they aren't prepared for you. They don't have a plan for you. They don't know what you're going to be working on, what skills they want you to learn. And you kind of just get hired to tick a box of, oh, we need to do apprenticeships, so we do apprenticeships. So if at all possible, find someone who has gone through that apprenticeship program, see how they like the program, learn from them. But if you can find an apprenticeship or an internship, it is hands down probably the easiest way to get your foot in the door, to get some experience, and really go after that. So definitely encourage those, and something that we are working on doing better at our program to hopefully line those up for you at the end of the program. I spell my day job DAYJOB. No, just kidding. I put the link to you, ZAG. Any apprenticeships I know in Syracuse, not off the top of my head. We are going to try and get you connected to Center State. Center State is a huge business network. And we will also try and hook you up with Erie 21 as much as possible. They are doing some amazing things for their students and careers. So we do try and collaborate as much as possible there. Glad to see that you guys are sharing those opportunities. There is a jobs channel in the Hack Upstate Slack. If you have not joined that, you can. It's separate from career coaching. And there's also a jobs channel at syracuse.io. Syracuse.io is the Slack channel for OpenHack. Same community in there, and they also have a jobs channel in there. So head over to syracuse.io, join their Slack channel as well. You'll see that appears next to the Hack Upstate workspace, but that can be a great way to network through there. Airbnb is notorious for having amazing internships. Google is so famous for it. They actually made a movie about it with Owen Wilson, who we have an entire project dedicated to in the API section that will be coming up in about 2 months. But yes, all great ways. Keep your eyes and ears open for apprenticeships. Also know that companies plan those up to 6 months in advance. So start applying for them now, because by the end of the program, some of those positions will be available. They tend to normally run on the academic calendar, so they will be spring, fall, or summer apprenticeships, but highly recommend them. There are also some requirements around paid internships, especially in New York State. Basically, a company can't hire you to do any work that is going to impact their bottom line, basically help them bring in more revenue. So if you are doing an internship or an apprenticeship, by law, it has to either be paid or for college credit, if it is impacting the business's bottom line. But don't quote me, I'm not an attorney. Thank you for the invite for assistance. You guys would definitely all be solicited for feedback if/when I get to doing a textbook. Internet of Things, home devices getting hacked. I don't lose sleep over it. I will say the only ever concerning moment was last cohort. When I bought my house, the furnace was leaking carbon monoxide, which is obviously something that you want to attend to pretty quickly. I had done a lot of research on heat pumps. I'm a big fan of electrification of everything for renewable energy and getting to a more green environment, a green ecosystem, a green society, all of that kind of stuff. Why do I bring that up? Because last cohort, I was in the middle of teaching, and the heat in my house turned on, and every heat pump also turned on, like the wall mounted ones. And I'm like, what is happening? I don't have that on a schedule. Like, all the windows were open, couldn't figure it out. And so I opened the app that controls all of those, and it said system lockout. And I'm like, what the hell does system lockout mean? And so I picked up the remote, which is not internet connected, and tried to turn it off, and they would not turn off. And so the heat had just turned on in my house, and there was no way to turn it off. And so I had to stop class, go out to my circuit breaker box, and literally hit the switch to get the heat to turn off in my house, because the thermostat wouldn't respond, the app wouldn't respond, the remotes wouldn't respond. Kind of crazy thing about that is that I know the code, and you guys will know the code by the end of this cohort. You will learn how easy it is to make a mistake like that and say, if admin equals false, don't allow control. And you can push out that software update and go, oops, that wasn't supposed to go out to production. I got to go push another deployment, but we didn't know we broke that until 24 hours later, until all of the people called in the 800 number and said, hey, LG, I can't turn off my heat right now. And this was not a small little startup, right? This is LG, one of the biggest. Obviously, you guys all know LG. So I'm not too concerned about it. Everything internet connected always has a shut off, always has a kill switch, always has something that I know how to fix. We're reaching the point where your cars are internet connected. However, I always do my research on that. I actually know how Tesla secures their cars with a virtual private network, encryption keys using SSL, all of that stuff. Knowing how the technology works makes me less fearful about it. But we're also reaching the point where all of our electric meters, our smart meters, National Grid is going through the process of upgrading their internet or their meters so they're all internet connected. There's all kinds of security that we get into, so I'm not too concerned about it. Obviously, you want to be smart, you want to have kill switches. But yes, it will be an interesting day when I can't recline my couch because a Russian hacker got in and started to control it from there. But because I know how to build the systems, it makes me less fearful about the security aspects of it. With that said, security and cybersecurity engineering and specialist is a great field to get into right now. It is one of the only things in the technology sector that is not impacted by the layoffs that have been happening at the larger companies. Karen, who was a program manager at Hack Upstate, I think you met her at the mentor meetup, is pursuing a degree in cybersecurity right now, and it's definitely a career that you can pursue after our program. Angel, love seeing that you're working with AWS. AWS, one of the largest cloud providers. We will definitely be getting into not only JavaScript objects, but JSON, JavaScript object notation. JSON is a standard that the next to HTML and CSS, JSON is probably the standard that everyone has agreed upon. JSON is what our APIs, or almost every API, communicates with. XML was an older version of it. But yes, definitely asking for help, an important thing to get practice with. I have heard of the soil chips at Erie Boulevard. I believe the compost at Okra is a little bit higher quality because it's certified. The city stuff is not. So because it's certified there, they have to get it to a certain temperature. I've heard that there can be some weed seeds if you use the city stuff compared to the county stuff. But just throwing that out there. And the compost site in Jamesville and Amboy, it's like $10 to fill your entire car. So it's not completely free, but I have found it to be worth it. Joe, no, not everyone agrees that engineering and developers are different. A lot of companies will use them interchangeably, or they will call everyone an engineer because they think engineer is a more prestigious job title. Not everyone agrees that those are different. I'm hoping that was what the question was about. I'm a little behind on the chat. It's the most sound professional career advice I've ever gotten. Ooh. Your mix is too loud, turn it down. So in college, I was a sound engineer. I meant that as a joke. One thing that working in theaters and stages and doing like venue management, I learned was how to perform under pressure and how to not panic. And I think that has really done well for me in my career up until this point. I also had a manager in college kind of call me out and say that I was a bad communicator and I was implying things that I didn't mean to imply, but that were offending people. And so the management training courses that I went through in college were really, really helpful for my career. No sound professional or career advice I've ever gotten. I'm gonna have to think about that one. Something pops in my head. I will let you know. Really, really good question. Um I would just say that communication is probably the most important thing that I found in my career. It doesn't matter how technical you are, it doesn't matter how great of a programmer you are. What really matters is that you can talk to people, that you can explain technical concepts to non-technical people, um, that you can get really good at talking to anyone. That really pays off in an interview, right? The whole goal for an interview is not to impress the person, it's to come off with the goal that you could see working with that person, right? You want to work with that person. That's the number one goal of almost any interview, whether it's they're grilling you on technical concepts, whether they're doing behavioral, tell me a time when, or what's one of your biggest weaknesses, or I know we're guilty of doing that throughout the admissions process, but I don't know that that advice was ever I guess that advice was given to me of like work on your communication, work on your management skills, and based off of those two, everything can shake out of project and time management, like learning new skills, like getting time to practice, like communicating in an interview. So yeah, I would just say management and communication were the two things that I was probably called out on for not doing well. And once I improved on that as a younger adult, that has really benefited me well as I have aged. Not going to answer the next question. You'll get your ducks when you get your ducks. You're stuck with me for another 5 months. You'll get your ducks eventually. Um, Joking aside, I have looked into custom ducks and they are very, very expensive. So unless you would like a 3D printed duck, at which point it will no longer be a rubber duck, I actually did look into getting custom logos printed on ducks, and I think I had to order 50,000 of them. And no matter how many cohorts I teach, I'm not going to get through 50,000 rubber ducks. So sorry. Yeah, working for a startup can be a really rocky experience. I don't recommend it to everyone. Definitely something that you want to consider the cons as much as you consider the pros. But I will also say that I would not have reached a senior developer position as quickly as I did without working for a startup, right? I wouldn't have been exposed to as many things. I wouldn't have been under the fire, so to speak, and rush to learn more things. So I wouldn't go as far as saying I recommend working for a startup. But for an entry level software gig, especially if it's only for a year or two, it's definitely something to consider. You'll have more learning resources and more support at a larger company, but it will also take you probably longer to advance on the career ladder. The flip side of that is also that you could get a really good mentor at a startup and you could get a really bad mentor at a startup or not have someone to learn from. So I wouldn't recommend a startup, but I also wouldn't dissuade you from doing a startup as well. One thing I will say is I love getting paid bi-weekly instead of bi-monthly. Having things come every Friday is so much better than getting paid twice a month. 26 payrolls instead of 24. I know it sounds really dumb, but if you ever have the chance, if you are ever paying someone else, go bi-weekly, not bi-monthly. I'm telling you, it is such a better way to budget and manage your finances. I will also say that I do have a how to adult class that I did teach last cohort. It is everything that I wish every middle school, let alone every high school, would teach. It is kind of similar to this in that I will rant at you for 3 hours. I promise that I try to minimize these as much as possible. Turns out that what I thought would only be an hour of content easily filled the full 3 hours. So I will start to break that up and only do an hour of that content at a time. We cover everything from what you should know if you ever get a chance to buy a house and are going for a mortgage. We cover credit scores. We cover 401ks and IRAs, the difference between Roth and traditional. We cover basic budgeting. We cover I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff in there, all things that I wish I was told that I had to go out and learn on my own. So that is coming down the pipeline. Whenever we get a break in the material, the technical material, I will go over that. But that one of those classes is also one where I highly encourage you guys to ask questions and engage. Speaking of engaging, we haven't done attendance. Go ahead and check. Go ahead and do attendance. The secret word tonight is IoT, which stands for Internet of Things. IoT. I think I have crossed the point of making a smart home. I don't know if any of you guys remember the Disney movie, like early 2000s, about the smart home, and it had like a vacuum built into the floor, and I
That was the
such
That was
best
the
movie.
first time I saw the projector as the TV. I was like, wow, I'm gonna do that. It was so cool.
So my I've definitely eased my way into a smart home in the last 3 places that I have lived. Um there's no hard and fast rule. Internet of Things, by the way, is the secret word. Just one more reminder. There's no thing of like what qualifies as a smart home, right? If I put one Wi-Fi bulb in a lamp, do I live in a smart home? Or like what qualifies as that? Do I need one thing in each category? Um, So yes, I would say that my home is smart. It wasn't built smart from the ground up, right? Built in the 1960s. Internet, I mean, ARPANET didn't even exist when my house was built. So I don't think that I would say that this was a smart home from the sense that I built it from the ground up to be smart. But at the same time, I've invested in almost every light in my house is now internet connected or motion connected. I learned a lesson the hard way whenever my parents come to visit. They just stand in the living room and shout at Alexa for 15 minutes and just guess what I named my lamps. So I learned the hard way that whenever you make whenever you invest in smart lighting, make sure the smart lighting also still has a light switch that can turn things on and off manually. Because whatever you named that light is probably not something that someone else would figure out what you named that light. That sounds really dumb, I know, but yeah, I've just like my desk, which I've built over 10 years of being a professional software developer and upgrading my camera and my lighting and my monitors and my keyboard and my mouse and all of that stuff. That just comes over time. And I've kind of built the smart home the same way. Where whenever I did have an opportunity to upgrade something, I would look into the best way to do it or get internet connected on that. But yeah, if you ever want to talk smart home, that is a great topic to bring up at OpenHack. A lot of the people there have also done smart home stuff. And it's something that I wouldn't say that I've gone off the deep end, even though I have so many internet connected devices. I have tried to stay on the consumer side of that. But every now and then there will be something that really annoys the crap out of me. And I break out JavaScript and write it more efficiently so that my smart home does the right thing. I cannot encourage you to buy a real duck. If you do, please check your local zoning laws. Ducks are like chickens. Depends where you live. You may not be allowed to have them. So please check before you purchase. That does sound ridiculous, but we did have a student last cohort who had chickens and forget what other animal they had where they had to get like village approval to have them. Anyway, you'll get your ducks when you get your ducks. Be patient. What light switches do I use? I'm a huge Leviton fan. I use the Leviton dimmers. About 4 months ago, I upgraded the last remaining lights so that they were all on dimmers. Obviously, you have to be careful and make sure that your bulbs or light fixtures are also dimmable. But really love them. So you always want to be careful whenever you wire something into your house about not regretting it 5 or 10 years from now. And you know, the technology, like their API just stops to work and you're like, well, now this thing's wired into my house. Obviously you also want to be careful doing electrical work and have a tick tester and stuff like that. But so I use Leviton because they've been around for 100 years. They're a US based company. I replaced my breaker panel as well when I moved into the house, and decided to go Leviton on that. Would have loved to do a span panel, but they are outrageously expensive. The thing that I liked about the Leviton panel is that you can upgrade only some of the breakers. So the things that consume the most power in my house, I've got smart monitors on them, so I know how much power they're using. But at the same time, I didn't have to drop like $5,000 to get a smart panel that tracked all of that energy consumption. So yeah, that is definitely a guilty pleasure of mine of buying a smart home device every month or every couple months. I can ask Alexa to open the blinds. I am also a huge IKEA fan. Growing up in South Jersey, every time I go down to visit my parents who still live down there, I pass 2 IKEAs. IKEA is known for their crappy quality stuff, but what a lot of people don't know is IKEA does have higher end stuff as well. They broke into the smart home market 3 or 4 years ago. They used the Zigbee standard, which is much better than anything Wi-Fi connected. So I invested in smart blinds because they were on sale at IKEA about 6 months ago. One of the worst things I ever did, because I bought 2 or 3 of them and really loved that they automatically closed at sunset and automatically open at sunrise, no matter what time of the day it is, because they are internet connected. And once I bought a couple of them, I just had to go nuts and get them for the whole house. Absolutely love them. If you ever have the chance to do smart blinds, especially in the rooms that you regularly open or close your blinds, highly, highly recommend them. Hearing the motors go is kind of weird, but they're all synchronized, so all 18 blinds in my house open and close at the same time. Yes, I know I am crazy. I did kind of. Oh, question?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's my first time hearing about a smart blinds. I'm just still confused about it. So it does it automatically like goes like close and open and stuff?
Yeah,
Or
so Alexa, close my blinds. Alexa, close my blinds.
I guess Alexa has performance issues. They're a little shy.
Alexa, close my blinds.
No, I don't want to.
You probably can't even hear. All blinds.
It is Thursday.
Took a minute, but you know, we got there. Yeah, so we've got a rule at work that we can't say the ALEXA word because our software integrates with smart homes with smart speakers. And so we all have one on our desk, and whenever we say it, everyone's in the meeting goes off. And so we've got like a company-wide rule that if we say that we're working on that, we spell out her name or we say Alex A. which doesn't trigger her. So anyway, I always have mine muted in my office when I'm teaching in case I accidentally set it off. So that's why I had to shout out, because I had to trigger the living room one for her to hear me. She definitely normally does a better job. I do not have any clappers. The only sound-based device that I have in my house are ALEXA based. I've also built so part of me being a sound engineer in college was that I go off the deep end with speakers. I am up to 39 speakers in my house. I know I sound absolutely crazy, but I have surround sound in almost every room. Dolby Atmos completely rocked my world, pun intended. Absolutely love Apple for bringing surround sound to audio. Other streaming services are finally catching up. Obviously, I'm a huge Apple fanboy. But yeah, if you want to rock out in my house, every room has a different brand speaker system. Almost every room is surround sound. I am a huge Bose fan, Sonos fan. CAF is one. The CAF is the primary one that I use in my office. And I will turn this off again and show you. Yes, ceiling mounted.
So the graduation parties at your house?
We will
Dang,
see. I've
beat me
actually
to
thought
it.
about doing like a 4th of July picnic or something at my house, so that we can all get together. Yeah, this is my only ceiling mounted Atmos system. I have Atmos in the living room as well, but they're upward firing instead of ceiling mounted. But this is the room that I spend most of my time in and listen to music the most. I'm a huge pop fan. Back to the what do I do for fun? I love going to concerts. I between theater shows, Broadway, and concerts all go to probably about 20 shows this year. So absolutely love that. Looking to AJR is one of my favorite bands. I've bought tickets to their show 4 times, and all 4 times the show has been canceled. So now I just think it's a curse that I'm never gonna actually be able to see them. But I do have tickets to see them in July, so I'm super excited about that. And then of course the biggest thing is I got verified fan for Taylor Swift, so I will be going to Vancouver at the end of the year. Yes, I am nuts. Yes, I'm flying across the country to see her. But you know, I'm a Swiftie through and through. My friend gave me a very generous birthday gift. And I saw her at MetLife, and we were in total like partial view, all the way up in the nosebleeds, and it is one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. So I'm very excited to not have partial view tickets to see Taylor in Vancouver. And no, I did not spend a ridiculous amount of money because I've got a cap that is for any ticket. It's like nothing is worth spending more than a couple $100s on tickets for. And I think it's totally ridiculous that our tickets are going for that. But anyway, yeah, I'm a huge concert fan, a huge music fan. I grew up with music always on in my house. My parents had like a zone 2 speaker system. And if music wasn't playing, someone had probably just died. And so because of that, I've obviously gone way more overboard than they did in their house, but that is why I have speakers everywhere. I have seen students pick up after the first 4 weeks. The halfway point is really the point before we decide, hey, is this program right for you or not? Some people don't get HTML and they get in JavaScript and they go, oh, this is actually what I really wanted to be doing. Some people get into JavaScript and absolutely hate it, but when they get into React, because React is kind of a hybrid between JavaScript and HTML, it seems to click a little bit more for them. But we don't reach a point of deciding whether or not the program is a good fit for you until about the halfway point or a little bit before then. homework assignments are definitely a good judge of that. Meeting with your mentor. There are some people that are just like limping over the finish line, but we get them there through lots of one-on-ones. That's totally fine. And we have seen people completely turn around in the program. And we're like, they're not gonna make it, they're not gonna make it, and they invest time into it and knock it out of the park. So I wouldn't be too worried at this point in the program whether or not you think you can make it. Give it until about that halfway point. And then you can also have those discussions with your mentor starting next week as soon as they're assigned. They are IKEA brand blinds. IKEA makes the blinds, and they are a lot more affordable. So IKEA on that. Sorry, just catching up. I've got a mix of powered and unpowered speakers. All of Sonos is powered speakers. And man, are they convenient because there's no on or off switch. It would take a textbook for me to document how to use the audio systems in my house. It takes a textbook to figure out how to use the freaking projector. So that is the only downside to unpowered speakers. That said, you can get much higher quality speakers, especially if you're not looking for oh, I'm blanking on the studio grade. If you're not looking for monitors, if you're you can get some pretty good deals on unpowered speakers. So I tend to leave unpowered, but powered is certainly more convenient, especially when they've got a system like AirPlay built into them. Okay. It is 8:33. I'm not going to hold you guys here. I will continue answering questions as long as you have them. But I am not delusional. Not everyone probably finds me interesting. So I will see you guys on Monday. But there is a really good question. So if you want to stick around, you are more than welcome to. If you had $100 for your stipend, what would you spend it on? The mouse is a definitely good suggestion. I use the Logitech MX Master 3. I think the 3S is now out. They do go on sale occasionally, so you can get them. They're normally like $80, and you can get them for 60 when they go on sale. If you are a mouse user, definitely go for the mouse. If you are not a mouse user and you like the trackpad, probably not a good suggestion, right? So something worth trying out. I know some developers absolutely love using their trackpads and don't want a mouse, and that's totally fine. Blue light glasses are good if you are having eye strain. There are a couple studies coming out saying that they don't really help, and then there are other studies coming out that saying if you are a migraine sufferer or have any eye dryness, it is worth it. So I would say the blue light glasses don't invest in if you're not having any eye strain now. But if you are feeling anything in your eyes, they are definitely worth trying. I used Gunners for years, Gunner Optics, Gunnar. I really like them. They're available in prescription lenses. I really like glasses that have a curve to them because I find that they help keep moisture in your eyes. And blue light is available for the most part. If you're buying prescription glasses, you can always ask for a you can always ask if blue light filters are available. Most manufacturers now will let you put blue light right into them. And in fact, if the light catches my glasses the right way, sometimes you can see they've got like a purplish tint to them. That is because I got suckered into the blue light, and I'm not sure if it's actually worth it or not. Ooh, thank you for sharing that. I will check out the manual. Stipend, $100, what to spend it on. If you don't like the Mac keyboard, that's worth investing. If you're someone who works remotely a lot and is not at your desk, a portable monitor is probably the best thing that I've bought in the past 2 years. It's a 15-inch monitor. I spent probably $70 more and got the 4K version of it. Because I'm a spoiled brat. Once you go up to a 4K monitor, it's really hard to work on a regular HD monitor. So that's definitely worth investing in. You can always save up your stipend. If you don't spend it this month, you'll have another 100 to spend next month. A good pair of headphones, I really, really recommend. Find what kind of headphones are best for you. Wireless earbuds, while they are convenient, have to be replaced every 2 or 3 years because the lithium ion batteries just are not built to last for that long in that size. So consider what form factor of headphones if you're going to get headphones. I really love over-ear headphones. Some people hate them. They can double up as a really good thing for Zoom calls if you are on them. Don't rule out wired headphones, Grotto over-ear headphones. If you don't mind everyone hearing what you are hearing around you, Grotto makes a great pair of headphones. Bose, Sony, all great things to check out. I love Wirecutter. Not the biggest consumer reports fan, but Wirecutter is my go-to source for all kinds of reviews. And they will review technical stuff a lot, and they also have daily deals that are like legitimate deals, not just, oh, this says it's 20% off because they marked it 20% higher. So worth checking out Wirecutter. At some point they will sucker you into a subscription for them. But if you're looking for reviews of anything, Wirecutter is a go-to. And then CNET is kind of my backup review site. But I'm a huge fan of spending hours and hours reviewing, looking up reviews for something for a product that I will probably spend less time using than I research on it. But definitely recommend checking that kind of stuff out. An extra charger for your MacBook's always a great idea if you work around the house. Having multiple places to plug in is great. A USB-C dock is a great option if you frequently are plugging a lot of things into your laptop. I think that's all I can think of off the top of my head for stipend suggestions. Anyone else have suggestions? Anyone else bought something that they're super excited about?
I bought a bunch of whiteboards and markers and stuff to do my wireframing stuff. I didn't use the stipend, but you can use that for it.
That's a really good suggestion. I've recently gotten into fountain pens, which sounds really weird. But I always enjoy playing around with pens and finding ones that I enjoy. I'm a very odd developer that I like paper and pen pens, and in high school I was a huge mechanical pencil person. The Uniball 207 Impact is absolutely my favorite pen. Get that shit out of here. I don't want to see any pens like that. And then the Lamy Safari is my first fountain pen, and something that I am growing into liking more and more every day.
Wait, where do y'all buy y'all whiteboards from?
I put the link in the back channel in Slack, I think. Let me look through. If I didn't, I'll post it again. Or I can post it again anyway.
Yeah,
Thought I put it in there
the
though.
two things I'll say for whiteboards is consider size. I do have a notebook sized whiteboard, which I end up using way more than my wall mounted one, just because you can jot things down while you're at your desk. But for project based planning, when you've got a lot of ideas, having a wall mounted one can really be great. The My tip for whiteboards is you can actually buy whiteboards at Home Depot for really cheap, like $30. And then you can buy a mirror mounting kit for like $4 and mount it to your wall that way. I've heard you can also use command strips if you're in a renting situation to mount it to the wall. If you do that, use a lot of them. Whiteboards are heavier than you think they will be. But yeah, you can buy a frameless whiteboard. It won't look particularly great, but it's really functional and really cheap at Home Depot or Lowe's for like a big like 4x6 one.
I just got the I put the link in that Slack channel again. Yeah, I have a wall mounted one that I got from Walmart a few years ago, and that's got a border and like a marker holder on it. But that one requires you to, screw it into the wall. But you can use command strips too. And then the link that I put in there, it was a pack of 25 9x12-inch whiteboards for $30.
Someone mentioned the peel and stick ones. I'm not a huge fan of those because I find that you can't get a flat texture with it. And then when you're writing on it, every time you hit a bump with your marker, it's kind of annoying. So I'm not a huge fan of the peel and stick ones, but if that's your only option, if you can't mount things to the wall, those are totally fine. Open source or proprietary projects impress more prospective employers. It depends. For proprietary projects, you get into some intellectual property. If someone is paying you to build something, they may not want that code to be public. And then you also want to get permission from that employer to use that as a portfolio piece, basically. Open source versus proprietary, it doesn't really matter as long as you have permission to talk about it. I've interviewed a lot of developers and they've said like, I can show you this code, but you can't record this call, which is totally fine. But the benefit of open source is it's usually on GitHub, so it's easier to share the whole project. The only downside to open source is there may be a lot of contributors on it. So it's kind of hard to go to a future employer and be like, this very specific section of the code is what I wrote. Which you can totally prove with Git. Git puts author whenever you edit a line of code, Git tracks who edited it last. There's a really cool command called git blame. And if you run git blame, it shows you who edited that code. So I run it all the time at work and go, oh, I was the jackass who wrote this line of code. But you can, open source is a great way to get your portfolio built out, especially if there's a project where you're like, oh, I really think I can help with this, or this is a feature that I think would be beneficial, or a bug that I can fix. But really just depends. Most employers, unless they are an open source company themselves, won't discriminate between proprietary and open source.
You mentioned what the over the headphones. So I got like these I don't know, you can see it, these Beats headphones right there.
Yep.
You think is this good for me to?
Yeah, that's totally fine. I'm not a huge Beats fan because they tend to be a little muddier in their bass. But they are an Apple company, so I can't badmouth them too much as an Apple fanboy. But yeah, those are totally fine. Headphones are subjective. And the headphones that I love may be headphones that you hate, not just off of style, but also audio, right? Everyone hears sound differently. And a pair of Apple headphones is going to sound really different than a pair of Beats headphones, even though they're made by the same company. So whatever works for you and is comfortable, as long as you're not playing music too loud and blowing out your ears, that's all that really matters. All right, any call for questions?
No question. Just I finally figure out how to that layout from last night. It was I gotta start commenting. I gotta start using comments for sure, for sure. Yeah, it helped me out a lot better.
Cool. And have you tried rainbow tags?
I tried rainbow tags. It's not really for me. I'm not a rainbow tag guy. I wish I could. It just confuses my eyes.
I am there with you. Some people are like, why don't you use these? These are so great. I can write HTML now. And I'm like, no, I refuse.
Yes, sir, for sure. Sure. Thanks, Max. I appreciate it, man.
Of course,
Yeah,
have a
have a
great
good
night.
night.
Last call for questions. Hopefully you guys found this interesting. I like to think I'm an interesting person. Not everyone does, but you know, nice to know who you'll be learning from for the next 5 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, have an awesome weekend, everyone, and I will see you all on Monday.
All right. Have a good night.